Do you enjoy reading? Do you enjoy reading short stories? Do you enjoy reading scary stories? Then I have just the thing for you. Stories of the Bizarre and Terrifying Omnibus 1. A complete collection of all of my short stories so far in one handy little collection. It also comes with a handful of neat little extras, including a glossary of all the creatures and forces I've created over the years, author's notes providing insight into my creative process and inspirations, and even 2 all-new short stories that function as proof of concepts for 2 ideas I've had for much bigger works. If you're at all interested, feel free to check out the links in the description. It's available in both ebook, paperback, and for the first time ever, hardcover. Alone in the Dark. This is a series that for the longest time occupied the same position as Silent Hill in my experience with the all-time classic gaming franchises. I was too young or too stupid to be in a position to either know of it or give it a go. So for the longest time, my only real exposure to Alone in the Dark was seeing a copy of the new Nightmare in the game section at the Hannah Street video shop, or playing and enjoying the infamous 2008 game and pirating the god-awful Illumination. So like the long-time fans of the series, I was eager to get my hands on the new reboot by THQ Nordic and Pieces Interactive. Given THQ Nordic's respect for legacy properties, there was reason to be optimistic. But the choice of Pieces, the guys behind Magicka 2 and the recent Titan Quest expansions, they seemed an odd choice for reviving a tragically forgotten pioneer of 3D horror and gameplay.
Alright, come on. I want to go see Dr. Gray.
But in the end it looked like Pieces. If they weren't fans, then they at least knew what the hell they were doing. What we have is a reinterpretation that will keep longtime fans and retro gaming junkies happy, while also keeping fans of modern game design happy as well. Just a shame the game had to come out with some pretty annoying jank. Like its main inspiration, Resident Evil 2's remake, Alone in the Dark is dripping with love and respect for the original game. People who haven't played the original games wouldn't know this, but Alone in the Dark was a Southern Gothic story, set against the backdrop of New Orleans and Louisiana, with horrors from Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos lurking in the shadows. It was a unique style that the later games just abandoned. So with this reboot, a return to that style already helps set this game apart from the rest of the market, but unlike the original, it's also got an injection of film noir flavour, something that's made very clear from the start of the game. When we first meet Edward Carnby, he's no longer the mustache-touting, red-headed gentleman he used to be. Instead, he's a more archetypal, grizzled, hard-boiled detective. Honestly, a perfect fit for the Cthulhu mythos. Then we've got the overdue return of Emily Hartwood. She's gone from just being some dead guy's niece to a more proactive go-getter, a female character type that feels realistically believable within the game's 1920s setting. Despite the name, you're not really in the dark till the later half of the game. Most of that time, you're bathing in the waning sunlight as the sunset pours through the window blinds and lending a standout atmosphere to the environment. Further influences can also be found in, well, how you heal honestly, which is from drinking whiskey in a flask, and I'll be honest, that's just great. Also, I loved the frog in the opening cinematic. If you played the original, you know what it's an Easter egg for. The game also has some really good sound design. I found the music to be top-notch. A good mix of soft, era-appropriate jazz and more melancholic droning songs that can build up into some chaotic rhythms. It really gives the setting of Deserto this uncanny sense of mystery and danger, while also being fitting for the game's more overtly chaotic and action-fueled moments. The sound effects of the guns have plenty of oomph behind them as well. The pistol and the Tommy gun feel fine, but it's the shotgun that sounds and feels the best to use. Every time it goes off, it sounds like God is farting as it shreds enemies in 1 or 2 blasts. Now moving on to the story. It pulls different plot elements from across the original 3 games while telling an original story. Instead of being a private estate, Deserto is now a mental hospital. Emily Hartwood has hired the PI, Edward Carnby, to help her investigate the facilities, as she goes there to check in on her uncle Jeremy after he reached out to her for help. But once they get there, They find that Jeremy has gone missing, and as they look for him, it becomes clear there may be some truth to his fears of an abstract figure called the Dark Man, and something else that's tied to the history of Deseto. It's an engaging mystery, and there was never a dull moment across all 5 of the game's chapters for me. We get a great cast of characters who, regardless of their screen time, always manage to make an impression, and the voice actors, they do a great job. The child character Grace, for instance, she steals the show whenever she's on screen. She manages to come off as a precocious tomboy that seems innocent, but hints that she knows more about what's going on than she's willing to say. Then there's Edward Carnby and Emily Hartwood. They're voiced by David Harbour and Jodie Comer. These guys are great in these roles. Though Harbour does do the better job and really sells Carnby as a damaged everyman struggling to hold on to sanity as the story unfolds, it also needs to be said that these characters have had their appearances based on the likeness of their actors. This isn't a bad thing, but it does create an uncanny valley effect, as they appear more real and believably detailed when next to the other characters, who, for lack of a better term, just look more video gamey. When you notice this, it's hard not to, and it just begs the question, why not just base all the character likenesses on their voice actors for consistency's sake? Getting back on point, this story is a slow burn, for the first half at least. I'm not against this, though I will admit some people might find this to be off-putting, but it does allow the mystery around Deseto to simmer as you take in the atmosphere and the horror of the shifting realities around you. It also shows a confidence in the narrative, with it being happy to just take its time. For the first half at least. The second half is when the pace just goes at a more breakneck one, and everything is more open with its connections to the wider Cthulhu mythos. The game's story was penned by Michael Hedberg. If that name sounds familiar, he's the man behind the stories in titles by Frictional Games, specifically Amnesia: The Dark Descent and Soma. And you can tell he was having balls of fun writing what is essentially Lovecraft fanfiction. Good fanfiction, mind you, with appearances from the crawling chaos Nyarlathotep and the Black Goat of the Woods herself, Shub-Niggurath, with it being references to other aspects of the mythos, and even some cameos done by the magazines Lovecraft's work was published in. However, I do need to point out that when you start the game, you have to pick between playing as either Edward or Emily. This won't change the broad strokes of the story, so it's not like picking scenario A or B when playing the Resident Evil 2 remake, but it will change how cutscenes play out and what finer details are communicated to the player. So like the Resident Evil 2 remake, one playthrough with each character is necessary to get the full story. At the time of writing, I've only completed one playthrough as Edward. Without doing another one as Emily, it feels like entire chunks are just straight up missing from the narrative. It also needs to be said that it feels like Edward and Emily should have had their own unique final bosses. They do have unique sequences that reveal important parts of their characters, like how Edward is connected to Grace and why Emily is unmarried. But during the story's climax, they become separated, but the final boss is the same. That just reeks of a missed opportunity to give the player another reason to do another playthrough beyond just the story, like Edward fighting Nyarlathotep as he seeks revenge for being pistol whipped, while Emily deals with Shub-Niggurath rampaging through Deseto. The YouTube channel Ben Again, his review of the game does a great breakdown of the story and differences between playing as either Edward or Emily. I recommend you check it out if you've only played through the game once as either character. Also, there's a subtle connection to the events of the original game. It's a blink and you'll miss it Easter egg, and I have to say, I just love it. I didn't know where exactly to fit this in the script, so here it is.
Are you ready to tell me what happened? I put a rope around my neck, and then I strangled all life from my body. Are you under the impression that you died? Yes. No! I was supposed to die. What does that mean? That you were supposed to die? I'm the catalyst. I had to die to make the story happen.
What are you referring to, Jeremy?
30 years ago, Frederic needed me to die.
You're not making any sense, Jeremy. Come back. Find your focus.
Hey! I cheated everyone. I didn't play my part.
Hey!
I escaped my doom. My destiny.
Again, find
Hey,
your focus.
hey, I'm right here. What the hell is going on?
Everything is wrong. Nothing is in
Hey!
place.
I'm right here!
Calm down, Mr. Conby. What do you want?
But there are bigger issues with Alone in the Dark than just a missed opportunity, like that it suffers from technical problems. This mostly comes in the form of the frame rate hitching, most notably during transitions between rooms. I was lucky because this, aside from some jank, was the bulk of what I experienced. I did try lowering the graphical settings from high to medium, but I didn't notice any real improvement in performance. Other people have reported things like the game crashing, progress, critical items disappearing from inventories, and even save file corruption. So suffice to say, I was lucky during my time with the game. Thankfully, Alone in the Dark does allow for manual saving at any time, so long as you don't rely on the autosave exclusively, you're golden. Now moving on to the gameplay, aside from fighting monsters or questioning the nature of reality, the other thing you'll be doing is solving puzzles. I enjoyed this. Recently I found myself getting into more detective games like Sherlock Holmes and Murdered Soul Suspect, so I've started enjoying puzzles more than I have in the past. What I particularly liked was how the game wasn't afraid to challenge me and make me think. I had to organically go over the clues in my inventory, while using simple common sense to figure out the correct solution to a puzzle. I won't deny that some puzzles can be rather obtuse, and there were some times with these where I either guessed or looked up a guide. It's also easy to forget what might actually contain a clue or indication for something that's relevant to a puzzle. For me, this was the case with the picture frame and medicine puzzles. However, the game does something that Silent Hill 2 did. It has a separate difficulty for puzzles. This is divided not between easy or hard, but instead between modern and old school. The difference is that while modern gives you hints, old school gives you nothing. I went old school because, like I said, I like to think. But in the settings, you can change how many hint indicators are active, regardless of which setting you chose. This is great because some of the hint settings are more like quality of life or accessibility features, than a way for the game to just tell you how to do the puzzle, like color coding for rooms that still have a puzzle to solve or something to investigate, to highlighting interactable objects that are in the environment. And that one in particular, I really do recommend you turn it on. Reason being is that it's easy for interactable objects to just blend into the environment and become invisible without it. I honestly wonder why this wasn't just a standard feature from the get-go. Something I'm disappointed isn't more prominent is Nyarlathotep, or as Jeremy Hartwood calls him, the Dark Man. This guy is awesome. His character design is suitably imposing and aesthetically unique. The way he moves, the purple and black color palette, and the overall design. It's a mashup of his pharaoh form combined with the more subtle aspects of Baron Samedi from Voodoo lore, which is fitting for the setting and tone. It's a real standout design, and I can see why he's featured alongside Edward and Emily in some of the cover art. But what disappointed me was the gameplay tied to him. Not because it sucks, but because it only happens once. During the Terawaya portion of the game, there's a challenge where you have to unlock a series of ladders while trying to avoid running into him. The thing is, he's constantly disappearing and reappearing around every corner trying to catch you off guard. But it's not just a matter of hiding or avoiding him, you also have to avoid looking at him. If you get too close or keep him in the camera's view, the game draws the player toward him and you take damage. It's a creative sequence and a real highlight. A tense moment that felt like fighting a weeping angel from Doctor Who, and had me honestly excited for more encounters with him, but there weren't. It's the only time in the entire game this happens. There is another, much briefer sequence that's great too, and I'll let that speak for itself.
No, no.
Really, I love how Pieces and Hedberg handled Nyarlathotep, but I just wish they thought up more for him to do. They could have turned him into a Mr. X-style stalker for the later half of the game. Maybe give the shortcuts that open up to Seto another purpose as a way to avoid him. It's just such a waste of something that was so obvious with a lot of potential. All I've really got left to bring up are some nitpicks that, honestly, I found to be pretty annoying during my time with the game. Like the melee combat. It's shit. You just bash the F key on PC or hold it down for a heavy attack, and the feedback can be so poor it can be hard to tell at times if you're even hitting something. Throw in bulk standard weapon durability, and just about every weapon feels like it's made of cream wafers. The stealth is also painfully bare bones, and you can't store throwable items in your inventory. You have to use them once you pick them up, and they're mainly for distracting enemies in stealth, or softening them in open combat by lighting them on fire. In fact, most of the enemies, they're just different flavors of zombies, which for a game that can be classified as an outer mythos story is really disappointing. And lastly, the price is just too high for what's on offer. I don't know how much this game is in the States, but here in Australia, it's $100. Another THQ Nordic release, Outcast: A New Beginning, that has the same price tag here, but the overall experience is of a much higher quality and more deserving of that price. Here, $60 or $70 would have been a lot more fitting. I enjoyed my time with Alone in the Dark. It's a flawed game, and while it didn't outright scare me, still managed to get me on the edge of my seat at times and had me constantly thinking about its wider mystery. There never was a point where I was bored or disinterested. It's not a classic, nor is it going to set the world on fire, but it is a step in the right direction for this venerated, yet tragically abused and neglected franchise. A spark that will hopefully ignite a bushfire with the sequel.
You happy? Stupid charlatan! What more do you want from me? You want me to lose my mind?
Oh, my lord! Doctor! Baptiste! Quick!
Jesus. What were you thinking, compadre?
Hey, thanks for being an awesome person and watching this all the way through. If you really enjoyed it, please hit the like and the subscribe buttons. That would really help me out in the algorithm. Sorry my output's been rather slower than usual. I've got a lot on my plate at the moment involving things like work, learning how to use the Godot engine, and working on my writing. But for the next game review, I was planning to review Dragon's Dogma 2, but I've changed my plans. I'm still planning to review it, but thing is, with RPGs, I tend to get the reviews out before, well, I've really given the RPG its due to time constraints. I really want to sink my teeth into Dragon's Dogma 2, so I'm delaying that review indefinitely, just so I can really give it its fair go. In the meantime though, I'm thinking I might review something I've already captured some footage of, and later this month I am planning to also review Phantom Fury when it comes out. I got all that more coming up, so please stick around.